centres Longstaff through to Isak in the onside. He shoots. It's into the back of the net.
Good evening and welcome to the latest episode of the Evermore podcast on the Evermore YouTube channel. I am your host tonight, Mark. I am flying without Christopher tonight. He's sunning himself in lovely Blackpool. So we are flying without him, but we'll try and keep it together as ever. Tonight I have with me Lee, as Chris would call, the Evermore's own Silver Fox. And join us making his debut tonight is Carl, who we've managed to scrounge fresh off the free transfer market. So welcome, guys. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having us. It's good to finally be snapped up.
Well, hopefully we can keep you for a while. That'll be good.
I'm all good, thank you. I'm expecting Chris in the comments tonight.
I would expect
days in Blackpool's no excuse.
Exactly. I think it's a poor excuse, but no, we'll crack on. I did go through this tonight is our 43rd episode. I can't believe it's been going since the 15th of December last year. So it's we're nearly at a year. So yeah, if you are new to the channel, please drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well. We are closing in on that 2,000 mark, which is huge for us considering the length of time we've been going. So, thank you to everybody that's dropped a sub on so far and continue to do that where you if you want to. So thank you very much. So we'll get started. Obviously, we'll look back. First of all, we'll look back at the 3 points at Spurs at the weekend in a brilliant 2-1 victory. Some controversy, from a Spurs point of view, not from a Newcastle stand. So, Carl, I'll come to you first with your thoughts on the game.
I think it was an interesting game. I was out actually in Manchester during the game, and I managed to watch the full game when I got back. So I was very, very happy knowing what the score was. But I thought when you look back, sort of 12 months ago where we played Spurs away and got beat 5-1. We started off well in that game. It was sort of like a role reversal where we didn't start as well. Spurs were on top for about the first sort of 10, 15 minutes, having a few decent chances. But then I thought we got a grip with the game and went to it well. So yeah, I thought it was a really, really good game. And considering Bruno had only had hadn't had sleep for 2 days, I thought he actually bossed the game, to be fair.
Tell you what, if you can play like that after 2 days without any sleep, God help the rest of the league for as he gets better and better and better, because he was I don't think it was his best game, but he was certainly brilliant. Yeah.
And then obviously you talk about the controversy, you've talked about the Wilson incident with Hugo Lloris, the goalkeeper. But for me, obviously I'm pro the goal being given, being a Newcastle fan, but I didn't think he helped himself, Lloris, he went down far too easily.
Yeah.
So people were saying, like, what's Callum Wilson supposed to do? He can't just disappear. But then you've got obviously the Spurs side is saying, well, he lifts his arm up as if he sort of grabs him so he can't move. But then that fall down, like literally as if someone had snipe at him. It was like a WWE move where he just went down. And I think personally that went against him, because the VAR looked at it and thought, well, he's gone down there. If he hadn't gone down like that and maybe stumbled back, it might have went the other way. But it's about time we had a bit of luck.
Yeah, do you know what? I think you're right looking at that, because that left arm does go up, but it goes up to protect himself. So, the dive, we'll call it, was very theatric, but and you're right. I think it did absolutely cost him.
Yeah, and then obviously you come to a couple of minutes later, when the second goal again, it's a mistake really by the goalkeeper playing that ball out from the back, as most sides in world football want to try and do this day and age, to try and play out from the back. And then obviously because of our high press and how we play now, because we're much, much fitter than we were under the previous manager, obviously the defender, I think it was Emerson Royal, was just basically snuffed out straight away. Longstaff won a header, and then Miggy was too strong. And if you had said one of his downfalls, Miggy, in the past, which I know we're going to talk about later on, but he was too weak on the ball, whereas now he seems to be so much confident, so much stronger, and he just skinned the defender who was there and then put it under the goalkeeper. It was a cracking finish.
Yeah, absolutely. I just jump in the comments just to say hello to everybody. Evening, Ash. Welcome on board again. Jimmy's back as well, so nice to see you. Paul, thank you. Yes, smash the like button. That'd be brilliant from everybody. Jody Toon for life. Evening to you as well, mate. And as William said there, the left arm looked bad only in slow motion. You're absolutely right. At full speed, it's not an arm that's going up to try and grab the goalkeeper or get in the way. So I think you're absolutely right there.
And you've got to you've got to also as well. In any walk of life, if you think you're going to get hit, you sort of brace yourself up, ready for the impact. So obviously he's doing that. Goalkeepers have always had license to just, especially in the box, to try and fly out with anything really. But that was outside the box, so it's like you need to be careful. And I just thought it was very, very rash from the goalkeeper. And he didn't really need to. I mean, if you look at the contrast of how cool Pope is when he comes rushing out, he seems to be smart with what he was doing. I just think Lloris was just far too rash. And as we've just discussed, he went down really easily.
Absolutely. Ash says there again, just you're putting your arms out. It is a natural reaction, isn't it? So it's it's not something that is completely untoward in that sort of incident.
Yeah, and as I said about VAR, you look at the penalty that we should have had from Joe Linton. You look at the West Ham game that got given. So there's still inconsistencies.
Yeah.
For me, going to a different sport in Australia with rugby league, they have this thing called the bunker, which is effectively VAR, but they have the same people who run it week in, week out, and they're the ones that are making the decision. They have ex-players and ex-coaches that are also on that board, which is something that the Premier League, if they want to make it work, as an example, they need to really look at that, because you need to be having a discussion from an impact of, well, what we actually discussing here from a player's point of view. Why have you done that? Why would the player have done that? Speaking to an ex-pro, and then obviously you get a balanced view, unless because at the moment you do have this really, really sort of, it's not consistent.
No, not at all. Not at all. Lee, your take on the game?
I mean, let's be honest, it's not a foul as long as I've got a hole in my arse. I mean, Lloris has dropped a bollock, and a big bollock, and his reaction, very similar to keepers all over the Premier League, his reaction to dropping a bollock is to hit the deck. I've been fouled and what have you. And it's too regular that the officials fall for that and jump to the defence of goalkeepers. You talk to any player who plays football, keepers have got too much protection, and it was really refreshing to see the decision not go for the goalkeeper in this instance. Coming on to the match in a little bit more detail, the first 15, 20 minutes, I was quite worried because Tottenham caught us on the half turn, just in front of the back four and in between the back four and midfield. 2 or 3 times, Ken was coming deep, getting on the half turn and what have you, and defenders hate running backwards. They hate being on the heels sort of thing. But the thing for me that I noticed on Sunday, Newcastle have got that many leaders in the team now. You've got your Brunos, you've got your Wilsons, your Trippiers, your Burns, your Botmans, your Shaw. They're all natural leaders. And I think after 15, 20 minutes, they identified what they needed to do to stop Tottenham getting us on the half turn like that. And we were a lot more compact after around about 15, 20 minutes of the game. And that sort of nullified Tottenham's threat. As I said, the Wilson thing, it's a brilliant finish. I mean, he's reacted as he could have quite easily gone down. People in the comments saying that your natural reaction is to go like that. Your natural reaction is to go like that. If you're running towards somebody and you're going to clash, you'll go like that. And I think Lloris had his arm up as much as Wilson had his arm up. So for me, it's a perfectly good goal. We'll probably talk about Miggy in a little bit more detail later on this evening. The penalty, how Dan Burns of handball against Bournemouth. I think it was. Was it Bournemouth? It was given, and that one's not given. And I was absolutely spitting it. I wasn't there on Sunday. I was going batshit crazy at the TV because as soon as that penalty wasn't given, I could see what was going to happen. Tottenham were going to nick a goal, which they did within around about 120 seconds.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that game changes entirely. The game changes entirely. As soon as they scored, I would be perfectly honest with you, I would have taken a draw there and then because the crowd were up for it and what have you. But I didn't have the belief that the team appeared to have at the minute. Newcastle takes the field at the minute. They've got such momentum and such belief in everything that they're doing. They've shown that by taking the game to Liverpool. They took the game to Manchester City. They took the game to Manchester United. They did it again on Sunday. And they've just got such belief in the people around them, the colleagues on the pitch, what they're being drilled on a daily basis in training, that I just think they're taking the pitch and I don't think that they're going to lose again.
Do you think as well, Lee, now in terms of the trust in what they've got with each other, because they're that drilled, as you said then, in terms they're actually happy to soak up the pressure. They've got a back four now who really it's Trippier and a back three, isn't it, really? Yes, Dan Burn goes up, but when we're attacking, if Trippier's bombing up on the right, you see Burns slide in and make a solid three. I just feel like they're excited to defend. That's what they like doing, those players.
But at the same time as that, Newcastle for the last 3-4 years under Bruce and Benitez prior to that, we would go to these teams and we would sit within our own third of the pitch and we would try and soak up pressure, as you said, with a view to breaking away. We had 48% possession on Sunday. We had 13 attempts on goal to their 17. We had more passes in their box than they had in our box. We had more passes in their half than they had in our half. That wasn't a team that was just sort of happy to soak up possession. We went for them. And as I say, I think that's a belief thing. Newcastle don't appear to have an inferiority complex the way we've seen over the course of the past 3, 4, 5 years. They're now going to every single ground they turn up at, believing that they can come away with at least a point and hopefully a win. And it's such a refreshing change. It's such a refreshing change.
It absolutely is. It's a thing we touched on Monday's show as well when me and Chris were on it and said, look, they're playing without fear now of others. You go back to previous guys of this team and, you're going to places like Spurs going, well, we hope we can nick a draw. We hope we can hold on. Let's not lose the game. Whereas now it's not all guns blazing, but we're going there to win. We're going there to compete and we're going there to prove we're the better team. There's no fear in that squad at all now. Whatever Howe has done over the last year or so, he's drilled that out of them completely, and they go into these games knowing that they're on a level with these teams and knowing that they can get something out of it. And
the other thing I would just like to throw into the mix in terms of what's really sort of helping us at the moment, the fitness levels.
Yeah.
I've not seen a fitter Newcastle team, and I think I've been going for around about 40 years. That every single man. I expected him to make a few changes on Sunday. Admittedly, I didn't want him to because I thought we've got a bit of a momentum, what we call it. Why pull players out who are playing well? But let's be honest, we all thought Wilson might get a break over the course of the last week. His hamstrings are made of cheese, for Christ's sake. But he's fit, he's ready to go. And every single player who started those 3 games, for example, Longstaff played every single minute. They'll be at Eddie Howe wanting to play. It's a really, really good situation where everything just seems to be falling into place. And I think we've now got a week's worth of rest before we come up against Villa. And again, we'll come on to that. But from a fitness point of view, I would challenge anybody to see a fitter team, to show me a fitter team in the Premier League right now. And compared to where we were, again, 12 months ago, where half the team looked like we're blown out of their arse after 50 minutes of every single game, it's just a different world.
Well, I think... Sorry.
Go on, Cole.
I was going to say, when you are on the front foot, like we are going to teams now and playing on the front foot, playing quite high up the pitch, although you've got lots of the ball, it doesn't obviously burn as much energy than what constantly defending is. And to your point, if you look at the stats that they showed a couple of weeks ago about the high press and where we were, we were up there. We were the best in the Premier League in terms of where we win the ball back and then what then gets created into chances. Whereas we were one of the most top chances, shots on goal, corners, and that all goes down to what you just said then about the fitness.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll take that and being in that top echelon as a nice segue into the next segment in terms of gate crashing the top four then. So thank you very much for that, Cole. We've managed to do that quite well. So yes, it's maybe a little clickbaity, but it is a conversation that's been had by some channels. Not so much Newcastle fans. I've seen it on the Football Daily. I've seen it. I'm sure I saw it in the Athletic and on Sky Sports and TalkSport have had this as well. And I guess if you talked about this a few weeks ago, you'd have been laughed at. But for me, I think there's a genuine challenge there now. You're sitting in fourth as the table shows that you are clearly sitting there on. It is goal difference and having played the game more, but legitimately sat there in fourth place. With the players that are on their way back to fitness as well, to come back in after the winter break, after the World Cup break, with a transfer window to come, is there a genuine chance now for Newcastle to crack that top four? Is that a pipe dream, or with the right additions, could you do it? What do you think, Lee?
Oh God! Oh, my head's all over the place thinking about this. I tell you, I've been looking at what you need to achieve the top four over the past 5 years, and over the past 5 years, on average, you've got to achieve 70 points to finish fourth, which is some ask. To finish sixth, on average, you need, I think it's 62 points over the course of the past 5 seasons. Now, we've got 26 games left. To achieve 70 points, we need 49 more points from those 26 games, which is like 1.9 points per game. Yeah, we're not achieving 1.9 points per game at the moment. For us to achieve sixth, potentially, and get to 62 points, we need 41 points, which is an average of 1.5 points per game, which for me is far, far, far more realistic in terms of what's actually achievable. But the more I think about it, the more I'm trying to convince myself otherwise. It's a real difficult one. I mean, we would need to get, we're currently achieving 1.75 points per game over the first 12 games. So we'd actually need to see our form improve over the course of the remainder of the season to hit that 70-point mark, which if you said to any Newcastle fan now, do you think this form could improve still further? I think you might get a few strange looks, because I do think we're really performing at as close to our optimum level as we possibly can. But then you say we're doing it without Isaac, we're doing it without Maxi, who potentially could be two of our main attacking outlets. We've done it without Bruno for 3 games. We've done it without Wilson for 4 games. We've not had Maxi all season. Then I think to myself, does the World Cup break potentially present us with an opportunity, because players burn out? We've got quite a thin squad. Anybody who looks at our bench says it could be stronger. We've only got 3 games left before we break for the World Cup. We've only got 5 games before the transfer window reopens. Now, if we can get to January the 1st, with the hand we've been dealt with so far in terms of injuries, shit VAR decisions and what have you, and still be in and around it, and then look to start thinking, well, who can we potentially add to this squad to improve it still further from January onwards? I'm not going to say no, but hand on heart, I'm going to say I'm probably 95% of the opinion no. I think it's a season too early for us. But 5% of me, just ticking away in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, but, what happens if? So I wouldn't rule it out entirely, but I think it's going to be a big ask. But hey, look, listen, how good is it to be talking about it even?
Exactly.
Thinking where we were 12 months ago.
Well, absolutely. When you consider, what was it, when the start of last season, it was at this point, there were no wins sitting 19th, I think, at this point in time, and everything looked like it was heading in one direction up until obviously the takeover happened. And
another thing that's got me thinking: could we just? We've got Tottenham, we've got Liverpool, we've got Man United, all to play at Newcastle. Make no bones about it, those three teams will be in or around us, or in the mix for those top 4, 5, 6 positions at the end of the season. I fancy us to take any of those on at home and at least get a draw from them, if not wins. And if you're taking points off the teams around you who are in the mix, again, it's you can see I'm having a fight with myself.
90 now, isn't it? 95 went at 90 now.
I think Lee's slipping into Jimmy's camp here about winning the league. I think you've not quite got that far. From William's point of view, William here has always thought 6 or 7 should be the goal. I think that's realistic. I'll come back to my thoughts in a moment. He also said there, most of the squads are battling with have to deal with European football as well, and that might be an advantage. I think the thing with that is those clubs have much bigger squads, so they can deal with that a little bit more. So, it is going to be an interesting one, Carl. I know you've got a slightly more cautious take. So
for me, what do you need, as Lee was discussing before, what do you need? And we spoke about when he said he was surprised, was Callum Wilson going to play again? 3 games in a week, which he's got hamstrings made out of cheese, as he said. For me, to get to that luxury of challenging, you need a couple of factors going your way. What I will say is now, something that Sky said after the Spurs game is it now the big 7 and not the big 6? And Lee said about teams taking points off each other. So that 1.9 that 70 odd points that Lee mentioned about is what on average you would need to get into the Champions League. That might slightly come down this season for a couple of reasons. Liverpool haven't started very well. And we're going to hopefully, as he said, we're going to start taking points off some of these big teams now. So we might not actually need to get 1.9 points per game from now to the end of the season. As Lee said, we're on 1.75 points per game. That might only need to go by 1.85. And then when you look at that and you start thinking, right, well, what do we need to do? You said before about the transfer window. We've got Villa, Southampton, Chelsea, Leicester and Leeds before the transfer window opens. And what you'd expect that come the World Cup, for me, if Newcastle are in and about the same place where we should really be on form, I think they'll go again. And I think they'll probably have some transfers already lined up. You listen to some of the other guys who work for Sky and what they think, and they all saying the same thing, that they think they'll sign one player that will have an impact on the first team. And I think it might be Maddison from Leicester. That's who I personally think it might be. And if you're adding someone like that, of that quality to this current side, it adds that little bit of depth. But my concern is our squad, and he's quite faithful with players that he winning sides. He keeps picking them. The problem is, as the season goes on, the likes of Callum Wilson or other players might start picking up injuries, and then we have to get to that bench that Lee mentioned that isn't as, hasn't got that depth. But there's one thing that's happening this year that never happens. There's a World Cup. Yeah. So therefore, these players are going to get 5-6 weeks rest that aren't in the national squads, which might help us. Yes, you'd want to see Callum Wilson in the squad. He might go over there and probably not play. He might get the odd minutes here and there. But personally, from a selfish point of view, I'd rather he didn't go.
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. And I think Ash says exactly the same, really. You are just an injury cluster away from it all going slightly wrong. But yes, there are only a few games to go until the window hits. So if you can keep them free, and is it what it's 3 games, isn't it now? It's Villa, Southampton, and Chelsea, and then the break.
Leeds, yeah.
And looking at those as well, those are probably, you would argue, 4 very winnable games, and one game that you go into expecting to get a result from, and
that Chelsea game's 5:30. That Chelsea game's 5:30 on a Saturday night. St James's is going to be feral. that night. It's the last night game before the World Cup. Everybody's going to have been on the lash all day, and they will. As I say, it'll be feral that night.
I'm sure War Flagsley will have something lined up, especially for that game. There's talk at the moment online of them getting a new surfer ready. Who's to say that might? I don't know how long it takes, but if they put some big display on, that is enough to, one, as you say, Saturday night, everybody's been on the lash all day. That instantly creates a better atmosphere. But if then that's the last game before 5 weeks, and everybody's going into holiday mode because it's obviously Christmas season and all the rest of it, I think it'll be bouncing. I would love it to be like it was when it was Arsenal, the last game of the season.
We've got the way we played against City earlier in the season. We've got absolutely nothing at all to fear from Chelsea. Nothing at all to fear from Chelsea.
No, you're absolutely right. I think I was looking at some of the stats about where Newcastle are and stuff, and the way that they've started. And I know it's quite a well-known fact. This is the best start that they've had out, sort of excluding the championship seasons since 2011, 2012 under Pardew. And then that was the only time that they've hit 20. I think it was the best start then since 96, 97. There was a run of 3 seasons where they were better. Interestingly, though, it equals 2011, 2012 and 95, 96 is the only seasons when Newcastle have only lost 1 game in that run of the first 12 games. And it has been an exceptional start. I mean, I sort of kind of agree with every comment that's been made so far. I always said that hitting that top 8, top 7 was probably the realistic stepping stone this season, but I didn't expect the start that we've seen from the club. Every signing's hit the ground running. There hasn't been a bad one yet and I think that's very, very well done by the recruitment team and by Eddie Howe about bringing the right mentality of players in. It's, we'll go back to PK's no dickhead policy. Every player ticks that box. And even some of the ones that were at the club that we thought were a bit of one have proved themselves that they are willing to work and they are willing to change. And he's getting a tune out of players that we never expected to see one. You look at the way Murphy's playing. Yes, he's not a world beater, but he's doing a brilliant job at the moment. And I think time will tell whether he will keep his place, but he's certainly deserving of it at the moment because I think he's playing well. And it's just another one of Eddie Howe's, master strokes with a player about bringing them on. Miggy will come to, who's just in exceptional form, and that we're gonna cover him in a second. But I do feel that this season almost has a touch of the Leicester's about it. Yes, you might not go on and win the league because I think the likes of, you look at how good City or how good Arsenal played, and I think Leicester's season, they hit a run where the teams around them weren't at their peak level. But I do think there is a possibility of being able to break that top 4. But it would come with the right additions in January because I don't think the squad is good enough as an overall to do that at the moment, because I don't think that form will maintain right the way through the season. You talk about 1.75 points per game at the moment. Arguably, you could be higher than that because if you look at the Bournemouth, the Palace and the Wolves games, those should have been 3 games that were won.
Brighton away. We should have had a penalty at Brighton away.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing with Brighton, I'd say Brighton bossed that game pretty much.
Yeah.
But Wolves, there should have been a penalty. Bournemouth, I mean, you should be expecting to win that. And I think the XG on those games show that realistically, Newcastle should have been winning. That's 6 extra points. That would have
Liverpool.
Yeah, and even if you look at those 6 points, that has you second. And all of a sudden, that the whole outlook on what's going on is completely different now. Hopefully for you guys that will, you get those things will come back round. They say it evens itself out. We've seen VAR do its job right this weekend. So you want 1 or 2 more that go your way over the next few months. But I certainly think it's possible. I'm in the camp that I don't think it's likely. I don't think it will happen because I think certainly the likes of Liverpool and Spurs will continue to improve as they go on. I think Newcastle will kind of at their very peak at the moment. But if you bring in a few more players in January and you can add to that quality, then you just never know. And the league is a weird thing at times, and you have this every now and again where a team will come from pretty much nowhere and surprise everybody. So it might just happen.
I'm definitely of the opinion that we need to dust our passports off.
Yeah.
Whatever competition that's for remains to be seen. Whether it's God forbid top four, but I certainly think a 7th place finish is absolutely realistic now, and that would get you a Conference League spot.
Yeah, I completely agree there, and we'll cut into a picture of 90 minutes power rankings for last week. Newcastle solidly in that top 6 now across Europe, so they're making waves across the continent now in terms of how well they're playing and how well they've been sort of respected by other publications and stuff. And you look at the form table at the moment, sitting top of the form table above Chelsea and City and Arsenal. And like I said before, you absolutely sitting in 4th place and deserving to be there, absolutely deserving to be there. But a big part of obviously the form at the moment has been the form of Miggy Almiron. I just think he's been absolutely sensational over the last few weeks. Is it 5-5 now he's got, and continuing to just look like he's providing the form that he showed in pre-season. So obviously we'll touch on him. Carl, I'll come to you first. How do you feel Miggy's been doing this season, and what changes have you sort of seen?
I think one thing Newcastle fans always do is if they see a player trying, they'll always back them. That's a given, Miggy over the years has always, he's probably had everybody's probably doubted him at some point, but in the main, he's always had the support because he runs and runs and runs and runs and he tries all the time. I think obviously he just looks like a player who's really enjoying his time, and he has all the faith in the world, I think, from the coaching staff, and just said, go and enjoy your game, go and do what you're doing with a smile on your face. I think I read something that what they've worked on is getting into those particular positions, or getting there, showing yourself there to go for goal, if you like, into the final third, but also as well on his finishing himself. And like you say, he's got 5-5, 6 for the season. If you look at his stats, they're all left-footed shots. So it would be nice if he could get a right footer on there or a head or something. But if you look at his form, he's already got more goals this season than he has in any season that he's sort of played for Newcastle. But I'm so pleased for him as well, because he seems like he's a really nice guy, and he's always smiling. And you talk about the camaraderie of the team and how there's loads of leaders in there, but it's just like one big family, and you've got players running around with smiles on their faces, and no more than Miggy, who's just at the moment he's on fire. I mean, you look at his goal against Spurs, how easy he just breezed past that defender. He probably would have done that in other seasons, but there would have been no end product, and that's been his criticism. And now he's our top goal scorer.
Yeah, confidence is a big thing there, and you touched on that. It's his highest goal scoring season so far for Newcastle in terms of league goals. It's actually his highest goal scoring since 2018, where he scored 12 in the MLS for Atlanta United as well. So he's sort of looking back to the player that came from America, because there were big things expected of him when he came across, because he was a goal scorer in that league. Yes, I know it's a different standard of football, but he has shown for the last couple of years just how hard working he is. I'll bring up some stats in a minute as well, just to kind of go over that too. But Lee, as well, just your thoughts on how Miggy's doing at the moment?
I love the bones of the lad. I have done since the day he signed. Yes, I've criticised him for having no end product and what have you, along with every other Newcastle fan. But for me, the energy that he's brought to the team, it's infectious, the energy that he brings to the team now. Sometimes he looks like he's what you call a kid chasing a crisp packet, but that energy spreads throughout the team now. Up until this season, talk about stats and goals and what have you return. Miggy actually had more bookings than goals for Newcastle before this season started. I think he had 9 Premier League goals and 10 Premier League bookings, believe it or not. But you talked about confidence. If ever there was a Newcastle player that needed to feel confident and feel loved, I think going back to when we first signed him, if you recall, he had a one-on-one against Huddersfield at St James's Park, and he did everything brilliantly apart from the end product. And I think confidence with him is huge, because after that he went on this long run, 19 games I think it was, before he scored his first goal. But his confidence this season's absolutely up a height. I think he benefits from playing alongside Trippier. I think they're developing a really, really good partnership in terms of trust. We talked about trust a little bit earlier, Carl. Bruno and him seem to have a really, really good understanding of each other's game. I mean, I was looking at some statistics earlier on. So last season, I think when he played, he had an average of 1.07 shots per game. This season, he's averaging 2.6 shots per game. Passes, last season, he was at 16 successful passes per game. This season, he's over 30 successful passes per game. And that confidence, you're seeing it in everything he actually does on the pitch. He's 75% of his shots are actually on target. One thing I've noticed this season, he's striking the ball a lot cleaner. One frustration I always had with him, apart from all the things I liked about him, was he didn't seem to strike the ball cleanly.
Yeah.
You couldn't strike a ball cleaner than you did against bloody Fulham. You couldn't strike a ball cleaner than he did against, who was in the other week, Everton. So for me, his confidence is just bringing out the absolute best of him. One thing I will say is January is going to hit, and there's going to be a lot of speculation around who we're going to bring in, and everybody's heard the name Diaby mentioned time and time again. I think if he carries on with his form, I think there's a strong potential that the cash that might have been sort of put aside for a new winger might be diverted elsewhere to somewhere that House sees as more of a priority. I love the bones of the lad. I do. I really do. I couldn't be happier for him.
I think that's exactly what you've just hit the nail on the head there, Lee. I think the funds that they potentially would have had there for a wide player, which when you look on media with some of the fans, they're still saying, get a wide player in. But I think on his form, you don't need to. You can spend that money elsewhere and see where we need to strengthen elsewhere, which for me is still in the middle of the park. But going back to some of the comments there, I don't think, Mark, you mentioned about Murphy earlier on, about his confidence and how he's playing. The reason we're able to press as well as what we are is because we've got 2 wide players on the front 3 that are pressing really, really high and playing with high energy. And then it allows... I didn't think Callum Wilson was as quick as he is, but when you watch him now for his fitness and his press, they're all up there. They're all putting pressure on, and, they're confident, they're fit, and they're doing really, really well. And Miggy's just benefiting from Newcastle playing further up further up in the third, because he's getting, like Lee said, he's getting much more passes now, much more shots on target.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that comment about can they continue with the press without him, I think it's difficult to maintain that same level. I think at that point, because he does do so much work for the team, both going forwards and coming back. And I touched on the stats before. If you certainly look at his defensive sort of stats in there, 12 of 18 tackles, 66% success rate in tackles, 1.62 tackles per 90 minutes. It's a little bit less than it was last season, but he's playing in a side that's much more forward facing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't get his pressing stats, which I actually wanted, but didn't get. But he's incredible at running players down and at tracking. If you look at some of his heat maps across the season, his heat map shows that he spends a lot of his time sort of almost halfway, but he's tracking back at players that are going beyond it. And then his ability and his pace to get him back forwards again and stretch defenders. We'll go back to those again. You touched on some of his shooting stats and stuff compared to last season. Shots per 90 minutes this season, I think I had down to 2.79 compared to 1.68 and 1.22 for the seasons before. He's not been as successful with his dribbles, but he's done a lot more with them.
Yeah,
he's done a lot more with the ball. You look at his shot creation stats; it's much higher than it was last season, and his goal creating stats as well, where he's been involved in a couple of passes before a goal. It's more than double what it was last season and the season before again, and it just seems like everything is coming together from this season. He is playing with confidence, and like Carl, you said before, he's playing with that massive smile on his face. And it is joyous to watch because, I mean, I remember that run of 19 games, Lee, that you touched on before, and it was almost a running joke, wasn't it? It was just at some point, when is he ever going to score? And I think there were those
but
thoughts.
Even during that run, Mark, I still think we were a better team with him in the team than we were without him. I think there was a lot of focus on he hasn't scored a goal. We paid 20 million, record signing at the time, and he hasn't scored a goal. But it was everything else that he brings to the team in terms of, say, the energy, the press, and what have you. So for me, I was never one who was ready to throw the towel in on the lad. I wasn't. Have you seen the video on social media of him sat on the dugout after he'd scored the goal against Everton last week, and he's just got this childlike smile on his face? It's just honestly, it's so good to see.
Well, that's what you want to see from your team, don't you? You want to see them happy. You want to see them enjoying their football again. And he is just the epitome of that enjoyment playing for the club at the moment.
Yeah. And Lee, you said before about obviously there's going to be speculation about players potentially coming in those positions in the January transfer window. I'm not being funny. The way he's playing at the moment, he's almost undroppable. And it's the other wing who we've got a player who's so unpredictable, who's unfortunately another one who's got cheese legs, who's injured all the time, which is Sam Maximan. We might go in for another winger, but it won't be on his side, Almiron's side. It might actually be on the left-hand side or someone that can play either foot. We've got the finance.
William said just that. Diaby can play either side too. The other one that we did a rumour has it this week as well. You look at Leandro Trossard, who can play down that side too. And they're both, Diaby's form's dropped off. I think Leverkusen currently sit about 15th in the Bundesliga. So the opportunity might be there to get him at a better price than you were quoted, or we were quoted in the summer when we were looking at that potential transfer. And another one as well, as Stu's put in there, is what about Jack Harrison again at Leeds? Leeds are struggling massively this season. And is that then a possible one to look at? And because again, if they're struggling, can you get him reasonably priced? Because we know that Newcastle aren't going to pay over the odds. They look for the right characters. So do those sort of players fit into that?
I think going on that, it really does depend on, as you say, the character, where they are. What I would also say as well is these sides that are struggling, Leverkusen or Leeds, with FFP, then sometimes to re-go again and reinvent the team, they do need to let someone go. So, I wouldn't potentially think they would go back in for Harrison. I think it'll be more along the lines of now that maybe try, because I think Trossard's only got 12 months left of his contract, which, Ashworth will know that, season, so he will know that, and he's proven in the Premier League. Yeah. Whereas Diaby, who's very, very exciting, but it might be a season too early for him to come over. And like when he's brought in Bruno and Botman for a couple of games at the beginning of this season, just to have a little look. If we're going for the top four, can we afford to bring players in who, they may just have a look? They might want to bring someone in who might want to, hit the ground running.
Yeah. Harvey Barnes, anyone? I think that might be he's definitely a cracking footballer. I'm not sure Leicester will particularly want him to go. Madison might be the
change out 40 million for Harvey Barnes.
No, not at all. That one is going to cost a few quid. But he's definitely one to think about, because again, he can play down that side. There's the potential for him to play either side and play very well there. But yeah, I think that's sort of, we come back to Miggy. I just think that he's been fantastic, and we do hope that obviously this form continues on, and so long as he's playing with a smile on his face, you'll get 100. Well, I hate people that do this, but you're always going to get 110% out of him, because he just gives absolutely everything
Is that possible?
to the team. I have this argument all the time. No, it's not. But yeah, I get the point. But no, he does. He gives absolutely everything. He covers every blade of grass. I'm going to use every cliche going here, but he's one of those players that you said, Carl, before. At the moment, he isn't undroppable because of his form, but because of his work rate and because of the job that he does for an Eddie Howe side. So it's just, I think it's a joy to watch him. It always has been, even when his form wasn't good. He was always a joy to watch because you knew he gave everything for the badge and for the shirt. So,
can you imagine how much of a player he would be if his right foot wasn't just for standing on?
Oh, unbelievable! I mean, me and Chris have said this probably 1,000 times in the last 10 months or so. It's just the biggest frustration with him is just he doesn't have a right foot at all. And the number of times that the ball's dropped him, and you just think, just swing it. I don't care if it goes wide, just swing your right foot at it, because one of these days, you swing it enough times, it's just going to catch nicely and just land in the back of the net. But he always hesitates, and that's my only criticism of him really at the moment. It's just try and use that right foot a little bit more. But even without it, my God, 5 goals in 6 games, and the performances he's putting in, you can't really argue with that at the moment, can you?
No, he's playing really well, and long may it continue. Let's just hope he can add some assists and keep Jack Grealish on the leash.
Well, speaking of Jack Grealish, his former club, and a nice segue again, Carl, so thank you for that. You've got your scripted. In your first appearance, you've been brilliant. It is the visit of Aston Villa on Saturday, and it's a team where they've been through the mill. They've been in dreadful form for a lot of the season. Had a massive win at the weekend over Brentford after sacking Steven Gerrard. So it is a newly invigorated side that comes to St James's Park. But they have a terrible record at St James's Park. I think it's one or 2 wins in the Premier League history, I think, potentially. The last one being the infamous Dyer Boyer one, which I'm sure we'll see lots of clips over the next couple of days on Twitter and Facebook and all sorts. But there isn't this game without those clips. But again, for Newcastle, there's absolutely nothing to fear, even with a team that's coming in that's been reinvigorated, that has a new manager to come into. So yeah, Lee, how do you think this one will go? What are you expecting?
I was nervous prior to the Palace game. I thought that would be trickier than a lot of people gave them credit for. I was nervous before Bournemouth, and I'm similarly feeling the same way on Saturday. I think Villa, obviously, they've peddled Gerrard, who found out that the Highland Iron Brew League was a little bit easier than the Premier League fairly quickly. The players will be looking to obviously improve. Good evening, Emery, before he takes the reins. I think it's on November the 1st, is it? He actually takes over in the dugout. But let's be honest, Villa's away form is an absolute bag of shite. They haven't won an away game so far this season. They played 6. They've drawn 2 away to Forest and Leeds, who again bag of shite. Really, really struggling. So they've got 2 draws away at teams that are really, really poor at the moment, and they've lost 4 games. They've scored 3 goals away from home in 6 games. And when you consider that Newcastle's defence is as tight as a fish's arse, it is. They don't score headers. From what I can see, they don't score a great deal of headers. They do have decent possession. I think they're running at 49% possession across the season so far. So they're not going to be a team that sits and just allows us to have the ball. But with the attacking threat that they appear to not be demonstrating at the minute, as I say, 3 goals in 6 away games, couple that with the fact that Spurs are strong at the back, our attacking intent, our attacking threat through Miggy, through Bruno, through Wilson, against the likes of Tyrone Mings and Jonathan Conser. I think Wilson will get a lot of change out of those. I think Joe Willock or Joe Linton coming up against Ashley Young. I think that's a battle that we could win. Ashley Young, what is he, 103 now or something along those lines? Coming up against legs like Joe Willock and Joe Linton, I think that's a battle we could win. And then you've got Miggy up against Matty Cash. Now, I rate Cash. I think he's a very, very good player, and I think that will be an excellent, what you call it, one-on-one battle. But Miggy's confidence
levels the other way around. You'll see Miggy up against Ashley Young, who's been playing at left back, and with Cash.
Right, okay.
It'll be probably Murphy that'll occupy.
Well, in a way, I would suggest then that might even suit us, because I think Almiron's energy and pace up against Ashley Young might be probably the better contest from a Newcastle perspective, and Joe Linton and Willock's just physicality and power up against somebody like Matty Cash might actually benefit us. So whilst I was worried 10 minutes ago when you asked me what I was thinking, I've convinced myself in the last 10 minutes that we're going to. It's not going to be an easy game. We're not going to turn you over 3, 4, 5, so what have you. I think we'll nick it 2, potentially 3-1.
Well, what are you thinking?
Yeah, you know what? Players are shithouses, really, aren't they? They're really going the shell, like literally to get someone sacked, and he's gone. Gerrard's gone, rightly or wrongly, he's gone, and then they put a performance in like that. Can you imagine what Gerrard would have been thinking? What the hell? But what I would say is, Gerrard seemed to have his click players in terms of who he kept on playing, and I think they made a couple of changes against Brentford, and they went quite. By the looks of it, they went more direct, and they got a bit of success there in terms of Ings scored a couple. He scored 2 or 3, was it?
Yeah, he got a couple. Watkins got one, and
he's always a threat. He always plays on the shoulder. Watkins, I like him actually. I think he's a good player. So I think, from our point of view, I think our energy and with us being at home and with everybody saying Villa not having a great record at St James's in a while, and the form that they're on, obviously Lee said before they've drew 2 and lost 4. I mean, the points per games is 0.33, where our home points per game is 2. And with how solid we look at the back, you know, Botman looks just like a Rolls Royce, as in he could probably play in his dinner suit and not get dirty. He's just quality. And I just think with our high intensity, I think you look at Villa's goals in terms of when they concede them, they always fall away in the second half. And that might be down to what Lee said about some of the players that they've got in particular positions who are getting battered, who are at the wrong end of the age of their career. So I think, depending again, flick of a coin in terms of where we shoot in the half, we're always usually against down the hill and at the Gallagher. If that's the case, then I agree with what Lee said. I could see a 2 or a 3-1 win, maybe even not concede, but I think it'll still be a tight game in the, say, 45, 50 minutes. And then I think with our pressure and passing and pressing that we do, we'll just run the legs off them, I think.
I think coming back to what Paul King says here, Villa changed their shape of the week. They did. And I kind of look at this. I think sometimes you look at a club when they change the manager, and then the team gets that new manager bounce in effect. I think sometimes it's freedom, and I think that the players weren't allowed to play in a certain way under Gerrard. He had his favourites. He wouldn't drop players that needed to be dropped that were out of form. You saw that with the continuation of him picking the likes of John McGinn. Aaron Danks, who was the caretaker manager last weekend, I think will obviously continue this weekend until Emery comes in. Changed the formation, he changed the shape. He played wingers as wingers rather than as inverted wingers, which is what Gerrard had been doing. He played that double pivot with Dendoncker and Louise in the middle, and it allowed Louise a little bit more freedom, and then played Buendia just ahead of them, almost in that sort of free sort of number 10 role, and that brought the best out of the likes of Ings, the likes of Watkins. against Brentford, who were awful. We'll call a spade a spade. They were absolutely dreadful. Now they're coming up against a Newcastle defence, a Newcastle side that is in hot form. The defence, you've said, they've got the best defence in the league. They're not being, they're not lucky in this regard. I think their XGA is only about 11 or so. They have one of the best goalkeepers in the league, who is, if you look at his stats, he is slightly outperforming his post-shot expected goals, but then that's the mark of the player over the last 3 seasons. So you've got, all of those elements coming together for Newcastle to go into this almost expecting not a runaway victory, but I think a comfortable win. I think it's going to be difficult.
That makes me nervous.
I say win. I just think that initial part. I think Carl, I think you said it right. I think Newcastle will come good as the game goes on, because I don't think Villa will have the longevity to continue at a high tempo for 90 minutes. I think Newcastle will keep it together and keep Villa at bay for the majority of the first 40, 50, 60 minutes, and then be able to take over from there. So I would maybe suggest it's a 2-0 victory for Newcastle. I think last week was it a one-off for Villa? Was it just a release from what's gone on before? But they're coming up to against the Newcastle side that don't concede goals. They don't concede many good chances against them, and from what we've seen of Villa, they absolutely need clear-cut opportunities to score goals. They're not scoring goals from outrageous distances and stuff. So I do think Newcastle will win this, probably 2-0.
It's a different proposition for Villa. I mean, a Brentford side that doesn't travel particularly well. You've just pedalled Gerrard, so there was an immediate lift amongst the fan base before he's kicked off on Saturday. Brentford, as I say, don't travel well. It's when you consider Brentford at home after Gerrard getting pedalled, to Newcastle away, having Newcastle just having gone into 4th position. And the scenarios are night and day. They are, and I think obviously it's going to be a far, far more difficult situation for Villa on Saturday than they found last week. I might be seeing that through rose-tinted or black and white glasses, if you like, but I just think things aligned for them against Brentford. I do, with the Gerrard situation at Villa Park, Brentford not being great travellers. Saturday coming's a different proposition entirely.
No, completely agree. Chris has joined us eventually. Thank you for joining in, Christopher. He's taking his time. But yeah, Bruno shit on the Villa 3-1 Newcastle. I probably can't argue with that scoreline either. But I think it will be tight to start with. I do think Newcastle will not run away with it in the end, but I think in the end it will be a comfortable victory for them. And then that's another step in that top 4 fight, isn't it?
Exactly, Mark. It's another one ticked off that list of them 5 games that we said before the transfer window opens. Now, I agree. I said 2 or 3-1, but two things could happen. Yeah, if Newcastle get an early goal, Villa will probably heads may go down based on what they've had this season. Cheers, Chris. And it could. I'm not saying it'll be a runaway, but it could be one of those ones where it's a comfortable afternoon. We're not really under any pressure. But if it's still tight after 50, 60 minutes, yes, I still think they'll come away with the win at the end, but it might be closer because Villa still have some decent technical players in there. They're just not been performing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, they could come out of that Brentford game on an absolute high, take that form into St James's Park and really put a performance in there as well. But it's Newcastle have made a sterner stuff these days, and I think had they looked at that last season, it might have been, oh God, they're coming in on a high, new manager, they're going to want to impress. Newcastle won't care. The players won't care now. It's a case of we'll do what we do, and we do it very well. So
I'll take a scrappy 1-0 win with the ball going in off Dan Burns' left bollock in the 65th minute. That'll do for me.
I'll be happy with what happened last year when, you know, Trippier, just before he went off injured, it was a 1-0 win with a bit of a deflection free kick. If it's like that game again, like you say, it's another game ticked off that list, ready for the World Cup break and then ready to come back and go again.
And I think that gives us a very good place to leave off. We'll head off, and I'm actually going to the game this weekend, so that'll be one for my one to tick off for this season for me. So, I said at the beginning, you know, if this is your first time here, please drop us a like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel. We are heading towards 2,000 subscribers now, which is absolutely massive, and we just have to say, you know, a massive thank you to everybody that has got involved with the channel, who's liked the videos and subscribed, and you know, we'll continue to do this. And we absolutely love talking about you know, the Newcastle and the way things have gone so far. I think Chris always mentions we are younger than the takeover, having only started this part of our journey on the 15th of December from last year. So you know, the strides we've made have been massive, and it's all down to you guys that watch as well. So thank you very much for that. I think I've waffled on a little bit too much there, so I'm going to get away now. I'll let you guys enjoy your evening. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and take care.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
See you.
Centre block stuff through to Isak in the onside. He shoots. It's into the back of the net.